Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode for the Recipe to Success podcast. My name is Daniel Leese, and as you all know, I'm the host for the podcast. And our mission is to bring motivational stories to your doors so that you know that if you apply the same set of standards as all of these entrepreneurs, you can be capable of absolutely anything. These people don't come from any special backgrounds. They just have fundamental values that they implement every single day to make sure that they become a success. Because for them, that's their ritual and that's how they get to where they are today. This week's sponsor is the TPSS Fund. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts recently, and they've been talking about brands that they personally work with that help benefit them as an individual and help their daily lives. And you know, during COVID, I really didn't know what to do with my money. And I came up and I was researching all over, and TPSS Fund was one of the most riskiest, let's say, but the most rewarding as well. And in the last 4 months, I've been able to make myself $10,000. So I thought I'd bring them on as a sponsor, mention them in the podcast so that anyone that is sitting there thinking, what should I do with my money? Then they have the opportunity to reach out just like I did and chat to the professionals there. So if you want to know more about that, drop me an email at hello@daniellees.com. So today's guest, I'm a little bit starstruck, to be honest, because I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd get the opportunity to podcast someone like this. And it was always a vision that you know, these type of guests would come onto my podcast. And, you know, we're not even at 40 episodes, and I've been able to get this guest to come on, and by God, he is massive. So he's just released a book called The Shoemaker, and it's taken the world by storm, where he gets to share his story on how he created one of the biggest sporting brands in the whole entire world. Even till this day, they are absolutely gigantic business in the sports apparel world. His name is Joe Foster. He was a young man from Bolton that had a dream to provide sportswear to the world. And fast forward to today, the business is worth over $4 billion. He is the founder of Reebok. For those that have read his book, I was absolutely hooked by the story and all the ups and downs that he experienced. But you know what? He never gave up. And today I get to share it all with you. Today's episode for the Recipe to Success podcast with Joe Foster. So, Joe, welcome to the Recipe to Success podcast. How are you today?
I'm fine today, yes. And the sun has just started shining, which does help. You know, it's been a lousy day, really lousy day. Rain, and it's not been that warm here. But today, now, this evening, just because you've arrived, the sun has arrived.
That's why they call me Sunshine sometimes. So, for our listeners tuning into the podcast, whereabouts are you based?
Well, we're in the middle of France right at the moment. We sort of moved, we came down here before COVID, and we sort of got trapped here. Where, you know, it's to move backwards and forwards, to move into the UK. Where are you at the moment?
I'm in Dubai.
You're in Dubai. Oh, well, it's a bit warmer up there.
Oh, I tell you what, Joe, I wish I could share you some of this heat.
Well, we do as well. Believe me, we do as well. Yeah, so we're stuck here in France because to go back to the UK, every time you go back, you've got 10 days of quarantine and all these tests. So it's we're just staying here. We're here until the middle of September, and then we go back to the UK because we have a lot of things to do in the UK. Yeah, everything's catching up to us now with loads of meetings and things that will happen, but all I'm going to go back.
So I've been hyping up this podcast because I know you're a very modest man, but you are the biggest guest I would say I've had today in terms of what the business podcast actually is about. Because, you know, the Recipe to Success podcast is to talk about successful business stories. And and you are probably, I mean, you know, you're probably one of the most famous stories to come out of especially the UK business wise. Obviously, you're wearing a big Reebok t-shirt, and we've got your book in the background, Shoemaker. So everybody will have a rough estimate of who you are. But if you could just give us an intro into who you are and kind of what you've done.
Well, I'm Joe Foster, and with my brother, we founded Reebok way back in 1958. And of course, Reebok, well, we became a #1 sports shoe company in the world. So here I am now, having written a book, and it's causing quite a bit of interest. So that's me.
Yeah. Now, the book Shoemaker obviously takes you all the way back to the very beginning, and I had the pleasure of obviously listening to it on Audible, where I could really get almost like, you know, the sensation of, you know, the good. I love reading, but the good thing about audiobooks is you can close your eyes and you can really vision almost being in that particular moment. So it really helped me to try and immerse myself into the story, and it's a fascinating one of lots of downs, lots of ups, and that's what I can't wait for us to talk about today, is obviously the journey through your business and how you got to where you are today. But the book, so it's obviously getting a lot of heat right now, which is great. But when did you decide to actually go, do you know what, I'm actually gonna write this story?
Well, you know, a lot of people sort of asked me for over the years, you know, why don't you write your story? But I thought, no, I'm relaxed. I'm chilling out right now. And we were in Tenerife, and we were in Tenerife for a few years. And but I kept looking at Wikipedia. It comes up from time to time. You know, people ask things, or you look, and Wikipedia and Google, and these stories kept on coming on about how Reebok started. You know, and a lot of them said, well, J.W. Foster's, which was my grandfather's company, and they said it just changed its name to Reebok. It did no such thing. And there was also a photograph that was on Wikipedia of Joseph Foster, founder of Reebok. And I have no idea who that person was at all. So I thought, well, maybe it's time to write the story so everybody now gets to know where Reebok really came from.
Yeah.
And that's 7 years ago.
And how long did it take to write the book?
Well, it probably took 3, maybe 4 years. But I think it must have had about 4, maybe 5 drafts going through it and just rewriting. And a lot of people, because I'm a shoemaker, so to speak, and writing a book is a bit different.
Yeah, of course.
I got too many anecdotes, so they told me, you know, I'm saying this happened, and said, no, that's anecdotal. So I was saying, you get to the story, you know, cut to the chase, as it were. So it took maybe 18 months, 2 years of honing it to get it right. And then, of course, it takes another 18 months to get it published. So, you know, time goes by, and 7 years, and Julie reminds me it's now 8. So, so it takes a while, really, to get the story out. But it's out now. It's been out for 12 months nearly, and yes.
And most importantly, how's it doing? How's the copies going? Are they flying off the shelf?
Well, we'd love to know, but the publishers, they're just so slow at giving us any information. So there's a lot of people who've read it, and it seems to be quite a lot of young people like yourself, who are doing podcasts, who want to pick up on business stories about how things happened, and so it's creating quite a bit of interest. But we're on a mission. We're on a mission to make it #1, or at least a bestseller in the USA. So that's our mission. And only yesterday I had a similar podcast meeting with somebody from Boston. So, you know, it's getting around.
Yeah. And are you getting approached? I mean, I obviously listen to a lot of your podcasts, and that's how I came about you. I was actually in almost like a webinar kind of thing with some guys that I do some coaching with here. And that's how I actually heard about you. Otherwise, I just thought Reebok was just one of those big brands that's always been a big brand. And little did I know that it started in Bolton. But yeah, let's talk about you then, because I want to try and condense this book into an hour and just give the listeners a bit of a journey of you and give them the backstory as to how Reebok came today. So, life growing up. If we rewind to say the baby you, and start us from there.
Well, it's not that. Baby me was born in 1935, which is 4 years before World War II. And I happened to be born on my grandfather's birthday. My grandfather died 15 months before me. So I was born into the world, and my grandmother, who was quite a fiery person, she insisted I brought my name with me. Grandfather died. So I was named after him, Joseph William Foster. And that, for short, that's Joe Foster. So born in 1935, 4 years later, I can remember bits and pieces before the war of going on holiday, but not too much, just because at 4 you don't remember an awful lot. But then the lights went out. So we have 6 years of probably some of the most important years in your life, when you're supposed to pick up things and learn things. And education wasn't brilliant at that time because schools were closed, and we did school in the teacher's house. We went to the teacher's house, and there'd be 5 or 6, and so we would learn. But there was a shortage of teachers, so one teacher would be teaching us a lot of different subjects. So okay, 1945 comes along, the war is over, and the lights come on. Oh, what's all this? Street lights, things like that. That's amazing. And then education got back on track, and eventually I went to college. I left college at 17 and joined the J.W. Foster Company, my grandfather's company.
So just a quick one, just to jump in just there. Now, obviously, us growing up as kids, my memories of growing up as a kid is, playing out in the park till late at night, playing football, Kirby. The PlayStation had just come out. So like sometimes you'd go around to your friend's house and play the PlayStation. You grew up in a war. Obviously, you had no lights. So obviously you only had natural sunlight when it was the daytime, but in the evening, like what sort of stuff did you get up to? How did you occupy yourself? And most importantly, I mean, forget the lights. I mean, where you were, was it kind of like a, not, I wouldn't say dangerous environment, but was like, was your area that you lived in kind of under attack during that period?
Not really. A few accidents occurred that were quite near. We had, in fact, it was a British airplane. I've forgotten the name, a Blackbird something. And the guy who was flying it, he was coming over us because I think his wife or family lived about 2 streets away, and he crashed. he crashed just 2 streets away, which was like, oh, what happened? So that was a bit dangerous. And J.W. Foster's, they were down in Bolton, and nobody wanted to bomb Bolton, but Manchester, they got a lot of bombs. And we were slightly elevated, so we could see Manchester, we could see the flame, well, couldn't see the flames, but the red glow after a night of bombing. And the air raid sirens went, so you all had to go into your, to begin with, you went into air raid shelters, and that was it. But as the war got on, nobody seemed to bother. They thought, well, who's going to bomb Bolton? So you could watch things going on. And but I can still remember the air raid sirens going off, and then the siren at the end of the raid, so they sort of let you out. And, you can remember that. But we had, in those days, double summertime. Double summertime meant, we have now summertime in England. It's summertime, so you sort of change the clock. And so it would still be light at 11 o'clock at night. Wow. And of course, we were usually dragged in before then. Come on out on the streets. We'd be on the streets playing football, just silly games, But in those days, we didn't have television. We didn't have any fancy things. So you had to make your own fun. Jeff and I, because Jeff was with me when we started Reebok, Jeff and I, we were also in the Scouts, because a lot of your socialization, we got social media these days. Socializing during the war at that time was at the church. The church had so many things. The church had bowling greens, tennis courts, and halls were, there were amateur dramatics, and they had scouts and comps. So, we had a nice gang. I would say that at that point in time, we didn't worry about a war. Too young, and we just enjoyed ourselves.
Yeah, fantastic. And I mean, that's one of the kind of, it's a blessing to have phones and everything at your hands, but it's that having that interaction those days is like what's important and what we all need as humans to interact with each other. But you obviously founded Reebok with your brother Jeff. Now, it was a family business to begin with, which obviously was started by your grandfather, right?
That's right. Yes.
And obviously, as kids, when you're brought into this kind of environment, was it something that you wanted to do? Did you enjoy it? Or was it just, it's a family business, this is what you're going to do?
Well, I guess you don't think much about what you're going to do in life. We possibly wanted to be a fighter pilot, or maybe a train driver, or something like that, the usual kid stuff. And so you don't think too much. And okay, the family has a business, which is a sports footwear business. And in those days, okay, football was big, and so was athletics. You had a lot of track and field, and that was it. And and grandfather, he was only 15 in 1895 when he made for himself a pair of running shoes, and he's credited with inventing the running shoe. And whether that was pioneering, his idea came from seeing his grandfather repair cricket boots with spikes in the bottom. That's where he sort of thought, if I put spikes in the bottom of a pair of running shoes, I improve my performance, because he was a moderate athlete. He just liked it, something to do. And he was only usually halfway down the field, but he made himself a pair of running spikes, and that improved. Oh, yes. In fact, he came a very unlikely second in a race. And that started his business. So that started his business. And Jeff and I, we didn't know an awful lot about it, but yes, the family business was there. Jeff went into the business when he was 14. So he'd been working at J. Foster's for 4 years by the time I arrived. And then 1 year later, I'm at 18. And at 18, that was the time when he went to do national service. So we had to go away. Jeff had been deferred, so we went more or less the same time. And Jeff went to Germany. I stayed in the UK, and I was on radar. But Jeff saw Adidas and Puma. It's like, we're making running shoes, but look at these. These are different. Yeah. So when Jeff came back, and we're looking at what Foster's are doing, and we're looking at a failing company, because my father and uncle, they'd inherited the company when grandfather died in 1933, and there was 6 years difference in age. And at that time, we didn't know it, but it was grandmother who was keeping them together. But once grandma died, once she died, it was just a total feud. Now, we know that Adidas and Rudy Dassler, they feuded, but Rudy left and set up Puma.
Yeah. Now, how old? Well, like, when did this all happen? Like, when did your grandmother die? Like, when did she pass away?
I can't remember the sort of exact date or year, but it was probably 12, 18 months, probably 18 months after, maybe even 2 years after we come out of the armed forces. So that would be about 57. So a year before we left. That's when it really became bad. And everything sort of, what are we doing? So it was 57. And no matter what we said to my father, because we didn't speak much to my uncle, mainly because father didn't speak to him, But there didn't seem to be anything wrong with either of them, but they just feuded. And Jeff and I had to pull them apart on more than one occasion because we were fighting. And we were looking at this and saying, that's not good for a business. This business is going nowhere. It needs a plan. They need to work together. Yeah. So that's why in 1958, we left the company and set up Mercury Sports Footwear.
And it's you say it's not good for a company, but it's also not good for a family, right? I mean, it's you're meant to be brothers, and from obviously listening to your book, you obviously had a very close relationship with your brother. I have a very close relationship with my brother, and it's just surprising to see and I suppose in your eyes as well, to watch all that kind of unfold when you had like such a strong relationship with your brother. But obviously you kind of saw from the outside in, what was it that what was it that actually caused the friction between your father and your uncle?
If I knew that, it would answer a question that I've never found the answer. There must, whether it was time, I don't know, but whatever caused it. The smallest of things can cause this sort of division. So we never really found out. I mean, Jeff and I, when we left the company, I think it was about 12, 18 months later, my uncle died. Because all my father could say, what I was saying, look, we've got to change, we've got to grow, we've got to do something. Why don't we set off and set up a company between us? And old father could say was, well, look, when I'm gone and when your uncle is gone, this will be your business.
Yeah.
And our answer to that was, well, look, Dad, we don't want you to go. That's not the idea. What we want is to grow a business. But this business here, this will be dead long before you. Didn't make any difference. I sometimes wonder that having lived and worked through 2 world wars, they lived through World War I and World War II. I just wonder whether there was any real sort of, could they get back to thinking this is a business, or was it just providing an income? Was it a living? And I think that's what it turned out. This was just a living, and they didn't see that the company was just going down, down, down. And when you think they were still in the same building that they'd been in, that grandfather bought way back in the early 1900s, still in that same building, which is quite small. In fact, it was an old public house, it was an old pub that he had bought and put his machinery in. So they can see that. And maybe, maybe they didn't get on together forever, but grandmother had kept them quiet, kept them together. And it was only when she died that really sort of let the cat out of the bag, and the whole thing, you could see this is going on.
Yeah. Now, in the book, there's a section where you speak a lot about, obviously, I mean, it wasn't just we're off, me and Jeff are going to set up Reebok. There was a lot of times where you approached your dad and said, right, this is what we want to do. And obviously it caused some friction when you finally decided to do it eventually. But it felt from my own opinion that he kind of almost undermined you a little bit, because it was almost like a kind of situation where I'm your dad, you're my son, and almost like always just listen to your elders kind of situation. Now that was just my perception, obviously, but how did it make you feel with all these times and opportunities where you tried to kind of say to him so many times and he just disregarded it?
Well, I mean, we just spent 2 years away. Jeff and myself had gone into the forces. And when you spend 2 years, when you go, it's a bit like probably going to university, but more, I could say, more discipline, much more discipline. And you have to learn how to look after yourself. The family isn't there, nobody to talk to ask any sort of advice. You've just got to make it up yourself, and with other people that you're with in the armed forces, more or less your peer group, the same sort of people. So you learn a lot more. And what you do learn is to speak, be sort of like, I think something. So when you're thinking and you're talking, it's different than when you're brought up in a home where the discipline is the father and you don't speak unless you're spoken to, things like this. Well, all that was different. So when we came back and we're talking, but I say it was when, after grandmother had died, which left us only 12 months to think about this. It was like, I'm sorry, Dad, we need to move. Things need to change. And it wasn't really a problem. It was more or less the fact that, you're pushing us into something. We've got to make our minds up. We've got to make changes. And so it was a bit sort of soul destroying at the end when he wouldn't move and we had decided that we would move. And I remember walking into the office on that, it was a Friday evening, and I said, look, we're going, Jeff and I are leaving now. we didn't sort of give him a 12 months notice or 6 months notice or even a week. We just went, well, we knew that if we said we're going, that you just got to walk out. It's something you're going to do. And so, yes, we did that. But I guess I did most of the talking, so I got most of the blame.
Yeah.
Jeff was still living at home. I just got married and moved away and living in. We just bought in the process of buying a property. It was on mortgage, so I got quite a lot of the blame that I'd led Jeff astray. But really, Jeff and I, we both wanted that move.
Yeah. Now, you start a business. You go off. It wasn't always known as Reebok. But before we get started on the journey of the business and how it first started, did you ever imagine that all the stuff that happened in this journey would have actually happened? Did you vision like this glory story of I'm going to start a sports brand and it's going to take off, or did you actually kind of imagine and foresee the hurdles that you'd have to overcome in the next steps?
We didn't see anything. We just saw a route out. We just needed to get away. This was going nowhere. The only way we could do anything was to open the door. And so we opened the door and we stepped out onto what would be a journey. But, we didn't know where we were going. We didn't plan that. What we knew what we had to do was to make a business. This business that's dying is very depressing. It's oppressive. It's like, we need to start having agents. We need to start selling properly. We need a plan. And you need to do that if you're going to go anywhere. So really, when we opened that door, it was just stepping away rather than stepping into something. We're stepping away from what we had to. So did we dream? Well, I think after you start and you think, we've got machine, we've got a nice factory going there, I think you do have dreams that maybe one of these days, we'll make it, we'll get big. And we must have had some sort of dream, because we did just keep going during a lot of problems.
Yeah. So you officially started the business in which year?
It was November 1958.
1958.
We found ourselves some property, and some we rented, which was an old brewery.
Okay.
And no lights. There was the ground floor, no windows. I don't know why. Maybe breweries don't need windows on the ground floor. Maybe there's something about that. And the top floor, because there was 3 floors, the top floor, well, there was a roof, but it was so leaky that I think we must have had 20 or 30 buckets and cans up there just catching water. So we had the middle floor, which was better, but still very old. And it made us think that it wasn't too safe. So we had machinery all around the edges. Put the machines near to the walls so that we not got too much pressure on the middle of the floor. And that was our first, but we prepared with that. And we bought machinery which probably cost about £250 for the whole lot of second-hand machinery, of course, nothing new. But that probably for £250, we got ourselves a factory and we could make shoes.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, it's funny you say that now, isn't it? I mean, obviously the value of money has gone up, but in Dubai, you spend £250 on a meal sometimes, especially if you go to a nice place. So starting a business on that is fantastic. And obviously you're newly married, so you've got a supportive wife to support you on all these hard days that are about to come upon you. So talk us through the name. So obviously, like you say, you didn't come up with Reebok. You obviously had players in the market like your Adidas's and so on. Did you kind of look for them inspiration, or what was the kind of thinking behind the first name for the brand?
Well, we thought Mercury was a good name, and we had the Winged Messenger. Probably the Winged Messenger, that was our logo. That was pretty good. And it was over a counter. Our accountant said, "You're doing okay, guys. You're making a bit of money. This is fine. You'd better register your name." Okay, what do we need to? Yeah, you need to register your name, because somebody else also thinks you're doing very nice with Mercury and starts to make some shoes and put Mercury name on it. You're going to have a bit of trouble, because you've got to have ownership. And if you've not got ownership by then, you're going to have to fight, and it's probably take you to court. And if this is a big company, you're going to be in real trouble. So you got to register your name. Okay, register name. So how do we do that? We actually have, well, go and see in those days, it was a patent agent. And there are plenty of those in Manchester. So we got to the patent agent. He checked out the name, found it was already registered by British Shoe Corporation.
Yeah.
Right. And he said, look, they'll sell it to you. You can buy it if you want. But they want £1,000. £1,000. We'd spent all our money on setting up the factory for £250. So where would you get £1,000 from?
So in the context of money today, £1,000 would be what, say £10,000, £20,000?
At least £10,000, £20,000. Yes, like you're a new company and you're 18 months old, and somebody's saying £1,000. Well, yeah, we'd been to the bank. The bank were lending us as much as they ever thought they would do, like £500. That would be it. So we could get from the bank. And that helped us set our company up, buy materials. So no, the notion that we would buy it for £1,000, no. But the agent said you could take them to court and you could fight them because they're not using it. And I said, how much will that cost? They said £1,000.
Go change the name then.
We changed the name. But he said, look, okay, if you're going to change the name, he pointed through his window. I was in his office and it was a nice day in May. And he pointed through his window and he pointed to Kodak. And I'm saying, well, what's with Kodak? He said, well, they made the name up. It's theirs. If you make a name up, that's it. It's yours. Nobody else can take it. You register that dead easy. No problem. Okay. So we go back and we sit around the table and you're thinking of a name. Okay, this is your company. You've not been going that long and all of a sudden you've got to think of a new name. And the agent said, don't bring me one name. Bring me 10. 10 names. How do you do that? It's like, that's almost impossible. So we're sitting around and we're thinking of Cougar, Falcon. Yeah, those are quite aggressive names. Okay, put them on the list. But let me take you back to 1943, in the middle of the war. I'm 8 years old. And, okay, like with COVID, nobody's traveling. There's a war on it. No light on, everything quiet. But we had local events going on. And one of those events was at the local athletics track. And for me, it was a 60-yard race, right? And we did have handicaps, I think, because I was only 8 and probably the older boys were less. So I got quite a nice start. Anyway, I won the race. But then again, I had spiked track shoes. Father somebody had spikes. Was that an advantage? Well, maybe, I don't know, but I won the race. And I go up to collect my prize. And okay, what do I get? Dictionary. I'm 8 years old. I'm 8 years old and they give me a dictionary. Yeah. And I said, come on, guys, where's the football? For me, it was like, give me something to play with, a football, whatever. But, above that, we're in, this is 1943, and they gave me a dictionary, but it was an American dictionary, a Webster's dictionary, which is rather odd because a Webster's dictionary, quite a few of the words are spelled totally different than had it been an Oxford English dictionary, like colour. There's no U in it in this dictionary. So am I supposed to be learning how to spell with an American dictionary? Anyway, we go back now to 1960. We're looking for a name. And I pick up my dictionary, which I still have there. And I like the letter R. So I open it up at R and I start thumbing through. It doesn't take long when you're in there to get to REEBOK. Reebok. What's that? Reebok. Oh, it's a small South African gazelle. Wow. Why don't we put that top of the list? Reebok. 2 syllables. Sounds good. Okay. Top of the list. I go back to the agent and say, look, we got to be in love with this name and we want that one. You've got 10. We really want that one. And it came back. That was really the only one that was clear that we could use Reebok, except for one caveat from the registrar. And that was if somebody starts making shoes out of Reebok skin, you can't stop them. Oh, well, Jeff and I would look at each other and think, is that going to happen? No, nobody's going to be doing that. So we got Reebok. that's how we became Reebok Sports Limited.
Yeah. So you came up with a name, you got everything going. Now, there's a few fundamental steps in this story, because you've obviously got presence already in Bolton. You go off and you get yourself some agents and you start selling across the UK. What happened after that point?
Well, I mean, we are selling in the UK and we're doing quite nicely, but well, in the first place, we started to make cycle shoes instead of athletic shoes. We thought, we'll not compete with father's company, we'll let them stay with the athletic shoes. We looked at football, but unfortunately by that time, Adidas had just taken the football market. They'd got it, that was it, which is surprising, since grandfather used to supply 96 rugby and football clubs. And in there, you'd find it very difficult. I know one. There was only one name not on it. That was Tottenham Hotspur. Everything else, Chelsea, Arsenal, Man United, Man City, Liverpool, Celtic, and Rangers, all those, they were supplying those back down in the 1920s.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they lost that business either, or why they didn't continue. However, that's another story. We were looking, so we set up at cycling. And I got a couple of agents. One was a local guy who on his bike, he was training on his bike. He said, I'll call on all these cycle shops. I think he was doing nice. He on his bike training, and he'd call on the cycle shops. Nice business. I also got a guy in London. I think it's called Watson. I forget his name now. I think it's in the book. And he was amazing. He was a Scotsman who'd moved to London. And he was sending orders, immense, incredible orders. And we had to employ people. Jeff and myself, we couldn't go. We had to employ people. This is great. All of a sudden that stopped. And of course, he don't have mobile phones, and he was living with his landlady at that time. And it was only 2 weeks later we got a letter from his landlady, which said, do you owe him any money from his sales? We wrote back and said, no, we paid him up, because apparently he owed some rent, and he'd been killed 2 weeks earlier in a car crash.
Wow.
And, that was the end of our cycle shoe business. Literally, we lost so much business at that time.
Yeah.
Wow. We've been progressing into athletics. We'd moved that way anyway. So, that was one of our first sort of problems. The next is we receive a letter from Adidas, because our running shoes, we had 2 stripes and a T-bar. That was the silhouette of our shoes. And the Adidas lawyer was claiming that that infringed the 3-stripe trademark. I'm thinking, what next can happen? And it took about 5 minutes. Then we said, just a minute. Adidas know we're here. Don't say we've got them worried, but Adidas think we're enough competition.
Yeah.
To write a letter. And that letter was stuck on, we pinned that to the wall, and it stayed there for a number of years. But we said, well, what do we do? Well, we'll change our silhouette. And that's where you get this behind me. You've got the Reebok silhouette, which is now known the Vector. And that was an improvement from two stripes and a T-bar. So, life is a bit like that. We had problems, whichever, our distributor in the UK, because we've been growing nicely. A friend of mine who was then the sales director, I think, of this company, they made just football boots. And he said, look, you're on athletics and trainers, why don't you let us do the sales? Because they were a much bigger company than we were. So we agreed to that. Unfortunately, the owner died, and my friend left, which brought in new management, who just destroyed the business and nearly destroyed us at the same time. But it was a matter of going down there and picking up our shoes and bringing them back and finding a way to sell them. So these are the sort of things that a bit of a handicap, but that episode brought me another distributor, because our shoes had been selling nicely. So I was okay. So I got it. But really, athletics, it's a small field. It's not big. And if we wanted to be bigger, because Adidas, they were in everything, and eventually they would sort of just, well, they would just sort of be like a tsunami, and we'd just lose out. Because when I used to go around selling, the retailers selling, and the retailer, some would say, Reebok, who's Reebok? Oh, well, me, these are the shoes. Others who knew us would say, look, I've got Adidas and I've got Dunlop. Why do I need Reebok? He didn't. He didn't need Reebok. Why do I need Reebok? However, we used to sell direct to athletes, and the 3As, in those days, it was the Amateur Athletic Association, produced a handbook, and every club in the country, the name was in there, and the secretary's name and address was in there. Okay, so it's a letter to every secretary. We'll give you 15% off Reebok shoes. And if there's anybody in the club wants to become an agent, he can get the 15%. I got 100, 150 agents, and our business was great.
Yeah.
But it's limited. And I knew the American market was such a big market that we needed to get a bigger market. So I had to set my eyes on that bigger market, and that was the USA.
Yeah. Now, I was going to say, I think one valuable lesson you kind of took from that situation was before you put all your eggs in one basket, and that kind of basket fell through. So you've spread out, and you've got these 150 agents working all over the UK for you. Now, just out of interest, how long would the shoes last for?
Well, I mean, that depends a number of things. If you're talking about spike track shoes, they would last quite some time. But most athletes, they trained on the road, so they needed a shoe with a rubber sole. And in those, we didn't have that much cushioning either. It was quite a solid rubber sole. And then how long would it last? Depended on the runner. We had Ron Hill. We used to sponsor Ron Hill. And he was the number one marathon runner, and 10,000, 5,000 meters. He was the number one in the UK at that time.
Yeah.
Now, Ron Hill was really what you'd call a floater. He never, ever landed on his heel. Even during a marathon, he always landed on the ball of his foot. And he never used to work shoes, but we had others, probably not athletes, but just runners out there. And if they had a very awkward action, they would just saw off the shoes. And also, if they're running on not so much tarmac roads, but when they get them covered with granite chippings, if you're running on that, just like if you're driving a car over that, it wears the tires out. This would wear the shoe. So it could be any length of time that your shoes would wear. And we did repair, because we had we called it retread, REE. Retread. Yeah. That's when we repaired shoes. That was very handy. The REE.
It's like you say as well, isn't it? It's like, because you've got only limited kind of, the population of the UK, and especially, like you say, if you're building these shoes well, and they don't need to change them, you sell one pair. It's not like nowadays where people will have 10, 15 trainers per whatever they need to do. You go into like rooms and in some people's houses, and they've got wardrobes full of trainers. Wasn't that like that back in the day? You'd have one pair of shoes and that would be it. That would last you for I remember when I was a child, I got some classics, and they would be there for like 2-3 years until they were literally the soles falling off because I'd ran them into the ground. But had you ever traveled to the US before you kind of discovered that market? Was there something that was a light bulb moment for you where you were just like, I need to attack that market?
Right. I knew the market was much bigger, because at Foster's, a guy called Frank Ryan and his partner, Bob Sheehan, they were coaches. They were coaches at Yale University. And they had contacted Foster's. So Foster's was shipping about 200 pairs of hand-sewn shoes to Yale University every month, which was a big order in those days for Foster's. And from Yale, they would sell them to different parts of of America. But I knew from that, and I met Frank Ryan, I knew from that every college, every university had a coach. And coach was a god in those days in the States. And you could go to university on a sports scholarship. You know, you didn't have to be academic all the time. You went on a sports scholarship. So the market was quite big. And it was 1968. And I'm reading, it was some sporting goods magazine that I'm reading. And there was an advert in there from the British government. And they wanted us to export, right? And America was the first place to go to. And they said, we will pay for a stand at the NSGA show, which is the National Sporting Goods of America. At the NSGA show, it's in Chicago in February. We'll pay for your stand, we'll pay your return airfare, and we'll pay 50% of your hotel bill and your whatever meals you have to have. Oh, well, you know, when you think about that, you think, well, it's cheaper than staying at home. You know?
Yeah, I'm in. Sign me up.
Absolutely, sign me up. So I signed up there, and I went with a friend who I was making some lightweight climbing boots. We were making lightweight climbing for Ellis Brigham. I don't know if you know Ellis Brigham. They're climbing shops in the UK. They have 5 or 6, Ellis Brigham. And Bob Brigham, he's the owner with his brother Ellis. And so he was, why don't we? Because he thought, well, in fact, what he did do, the shoes we were making for him, the boots we were making for him, he was also selling to other shops. And I think it was called Moac Mountain something. And it was Moac at the time, Mountain Activities. Anyway, he said, well, we'll go join. So we went to America. We stopped off in New York. This is 1968. We stopped off in New York, and he looked at the outdoor stores, and I was looking at the sports stores. Then we went on to Chicago, fine, and a lot of people, a lot of retailers, American retailers, coming up and saying, "Love your product, it's great. Where do I get them from?" Of course, when I said England, he said, "Is that New England?" No, not New England. It's over the water. Where's that? England. Is that near London? Yes, England's near London. So, and it was pretty obvious that these guys were not used to the idea of importation. This is 1968, and I must have had at least 6 failed attempts on people who wanted to do the distribution in the USA. Tried. But it was 1979 before I actually got Paul Fireman to be the input. But the reason for that was, okay, we're trying to push our way into the market. A bit like me going into the retailers in the UK and they're saying, why do I need Reebok? Why does America need Reebok? They didn't. But at that time, very late in 1960s, all the way through 1970s, the running market in America just exploded. And this is what Nike grew on the back of that explosion. Nike grew into a company. But for us, it was Runner's World. Runner's World actually was the Bible. And Runner's World started as a single page, and by 1975 was a full-blown glossy magazine, full color. And Bob Anderson, doing so well with his magazine, was telling everybody, you should wear this shoe. This is the #1 shoe in our opinion. And I think the first time that was a Nike. And of course, Phil Knight. Phil Knight is importing his shoes from Japan. And you're thinking at that time, there's probably about 40 million runners in America. Maybe 4 million of those, we say 10%, think, well, I'd like to buy a pair of these #1 running training shoes. So Phil Knight is faced with a problem. How does he satisfy the orders? Well, he can't. He can't, because the factory that's supplying him can't raise their production that much. So by the time he got enough shoes coming into the country, 12 months had gone by. Bob Anderson saying, no, not that shoe. This is a new shoe here. This one, maybe a new balance. This one's the shoe, #1 shoe. That only happened twice because the retail trade was just absolutely floored with this. They can't do that. So he changed it. He changed it to a star rating. So, okay, 5-star, that's the best shoes you can buy. But there could be 3 or 4, maybe even 5-star shoes. And when he did that, I knew that was it. We could make a 5-star shoe. I knew we could make a 5-star shoe. Yeah, making a #1 shoe, that was a bit of personal taste and like, how can you do that? But a 5-star shoe, we could do it. And we did. We came up with Aztec. Aztec, that was a new shoe, fantastic, made to be 5 stars. But it's in January 1979, and we're at the NSGA show again. And by that time, running was growing so big that a lot of companies were wanting to get involved, and Kmart wanted to get involved, wanted to place 25,000 pairs with me. Well, that's about 6 months' work for our small factory. But we knew the business was growing fast in America. We knew that if we got a 5-star, we would need help. And I had another friend, a friend at Barter, who, and they're the biggest shoe company in the world, Barter, all over. And they said, well, we'll help you. We'll help with production. Fantastic. Okay. But then Kmart wanted a better price. Oh. That meant going to the Far East and having them made in the Far East, because everything was moving that way. The shoe business in the UK was just, couldn't at all, no chat. So it was going to the Far East, and I'd already made arrangements with their agent. There was an agent in London who was working with the Far East, working with Korea. Right, so I knew we could do that if we got our 5-star. But then Paul Feynman came along, and Paul Feynman was running a wholesale business. It was an outdoors wholesale business, tents, fishing rods, all the bits and pieces of that. And I like Paul Feynman. I wasn't too sure about the Kmart thing, but Paul Feynman came around, and I could see he was a bit fed up of selling tents and fishing rods and all the camping gear. And he was working that business with his brother Steve, and his brother-in-law Terry. And he said, look, John, I'd love to be a distributor, but we really need a 5-star shoe. You get a 5-star shoe. And I said, Paul, look, Aztec. Yeah, he said, but, it's not a 5-star shoe yet, is it? I said, no, but it will be. Well, he said, if you get a 5-star shoe, it's, we're going to work together. Right.
How long did it take for these to come out, the 5-star ratings? Was it something that was announced like once a year or once a term, or kind of like quarter?
Once a year, and it was in August. So the magazine would be out the last week in July. Meanwhile, of course, this is February, and meanwhile, I went to America, went to see Kmart, and they pointed to the guy I'd seen who'd come to the exhibition and wanted 25,000 pairs. And he was about, I don't know, aisle 6, number 10. There was about 200 people in that room, all buyers for Kmart. So I had a nice, pleasant conversation with him, but I knew if I took on his 25,000 pairs, that might be my first and last order. Because if we didn't sell the square footage, we didn't produce enough money in that square footage, no, we'd be dead. And I thought, these people are not interested in building the brand either. It was my brand. We need the brand to build. So I also went to see Paul Feynman and see his operation, see Boston Camping, nice little business, and great, okay. And I thought, that'd be nice, a nice place to step off from. I'm sure they'd do a good job. So we're talking about the third week in July in 1979, and I phoned Paul Feynman and said, Paul, can you go down to the local kiosk and pick up a Runner's World? It should be out now, last week in July, your August edition. It's an hour later. Paul came back. Joe, Aztec, you've got 5 stars. I said, I told you, Paul, but wow, isn't that great? Fantastic, we're in business. He said, but not only that, you also got 5 stars for the Inca and the Midas. Midas was a road racing shoe, and Inca was a spike. So we got 3 5-star shoes to get us into America. And that was the difference between trying to push, and now we've got the hook, which is what the Americans refer to.
And in terms of volume, so once you got those 5-star ratings, like in terms of volume of sales, like how much did it go up from, say, for instance, I suppose numbers is a bit difficult for you to say, but like on a percentage basis, like how busy did you become kind of honoring those orders that come through from the ratings?
Well, we didn't get a great amount until we went to the NSGA show, which would be in 80. And that's where we had a stand. Yes, there were orders coming in, And Barter made 20,000 pairs for us. And that 20,000 pairs was, as I say, very nearly 6 months of work as far as the factory. So our factory was coping with its normal business, the UK and 1 or 2 exports and that. But this 20,000 pair came from Barter. And we had a big problem with them. You heard the book.
Yeah.
It's in the book. So there was a problem. But the biggest problem after that was the fact that with Korea, we've got Korea coming on. So Barton were producing a shoe at the same price, just a bit lower than what we could produce them in our own factory. But in the Far East, they could produce it at less than half the price. So there was no competition. But the problem was, whilst Barter were giving us a credit line, in other words, they would sell us the shoes and we could take 1 to 2 months to pay them. When you go to the Far East, you've got to put your money down.
Yeah.
In those days, it's called a letter of credit. It probably still is a letter of credit, but they don't give you any time to pay. There's no credit line there. So that was the first problem. How do we do this? Well, we weren't a rich company. We were nice, doing nice business, but this was going to take a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so we had to crack that one. We had to crack that first, which we did. Paul knew a guy. Well, it was about 3 or 4. A guy knew a guy, and it was Stephen Rubin in London. Stephen Rubin was Pentland Industries, and Pentland Industries, one of the companies, ASCO, actually worked in the Far East sourcing product, and they were sourcing them, and they'd source them for big companies. And he thought that what Paul could do was to get people like Sears, Reebok, and all the big companies in the USA to place orders, because again, they would be cheaper than trying to buy them in America. But Paul said no.
Now we're at a point now where you're obviously got the 5-star rating. Now, from the time you entered the US to the time you got a 5-star rating, in terms of year-wise, so the listeners can just understand the length of time it's actually taken you.
It took me 11 years. It took me 11 years of knocking on that door. And I said I had about 6 attempts. And with one guy who was in Philadelphia, I was with him 4 years trying to get into the market. Yeah. And the difference was having the 5 stars, having the hook. There needed to be a reason. Why would they want to buy Reebok? It's that same thing. So persuade him, you've got to find what is the hook. And that hook was getting a 5-star shoe. But that wasn't the big thing for Reebok.
Yeah, you didn't.
Reebok, aerobics.
Yeah, but that's what I was leading on to. Obviously you've taken is it 11 years, you say, to crack America and get that 5-star rating. And again, that wasn't even really the part where you blew off and you took off and went into the stratosphere of sportswear. But now the first thing that pops into my mind, because I work in the corporate world, and you see it all the time where people have challenges and they just simply give up, especially after the first, second, third time. What was in your mind to keep going? Because by this time, you've got your brother working back in the UK. You're obviously trying to make things work in the US. You're married. This time you had children, right?
Yes.
So you've got all these fundamental outside factors that are poking in and putting pressure on you as well, which could in your own right make it a lot more easier for you to just go, yeah, you know what, I've got a family at home, I'm just going to go back. But what was it inside you, that burning desire that just wanted you to keep going?
It's hard to say whether it was burning desire or whether it was sheer stupidity, but I was enjoying it. Yeah, the challenge was fun. Yeah, it was like, okay, so this didn't work, so we need something else. We can work. Yeah, we had a nice steady business in the UK, which was nice, and I'd found a new distributor, so no need to worry about that. And I had somebody making some apparel, so I had certain things in place, and that was sustaining the business, and that was fine. So it wasn't really that hard to say, okay, we've got to keep knocking at this door. It's not the fact that I couldn't keep going. Okay, my wife and Jeff's wife, Jeff didn't bother. Jeff thought, because he loved the factory. He just loved the factory. And he didn't want me interfering in the factory. No.
Yeah.
We,
He was the
we never
boss
fell
there.
out. As you know. Yeah, we never fell out, but I'm sure he was sort of saying, oh, no, keep him, you keep doing that. You keep battering at those doors. I'll just keep the factory going. And it worked. It worked very well for us. And he loved it. He loved it, really, really did. And I loved the challenges. Yeah, and there were those challenges of how do we get over this? And okay, I probably nearly put the factory out of business by, first of all, going with the company as a distributor, putting everything into them for distribution. That gave me more time for something else. But they went out of business. So, I'd made some pretty, they may have been very informed and very good decisions at the time, but they turned out to be disastrous almost. And we had to learn how to get over disasters. Well, we've been learning that for a long time. You get over disasters, facing it head on and going into it. So going to America, okay, whilst the challenge is there, and I loved the challenge, and it was, we've got to try it. I had somebody in California as well. We tried in California. I think somebody else in Cincinnati. I had a lot of different attempts at how do we get into this. And to say, now how we managed to get into it.
Yeah.
And I think, no, even today, I mean, I'm still very much aware of Reebok and, still part of it and still want to be part of it, even though I retired way back in 1989. But that challenge was great. And once we got into America, we were doing nicely. Running was doing good. Then along came, we had a tech rep. In America, they do this. Somebody who knows something about the shoes will go into the store and work with the salesman. Doesn't just go up and try and sell shoes. No, he goes and works with the salesman and tells the salesman, these are the good points. This is what the shoe does. This is good. So, and they also in America, they used to call it spiffing. And spiffing is that they would make an arrangement with all the store salespeople. Every shoe you sell, you just rip this thing off, send it to us, and we'll give you $1. So it was, I don't say it's a bit of black incentive, bit of incentive to sell Reebok. So, but the tech rep was there to really sell the good things about the shoe. And one of these tech reps was Arno Martinez, and he was another one of my gatekeepers. Arno Martinez, he worked in Los Angeles. Well, it's a nice place to work in Los Angeles, of course, and. His wife, Frankie, she's coming home from these aerobic classes. And Arnold's saying, what's that? And she said, well, we're exercising to music. And it's fantastic. And all the friends are full of it as well. Arnold said, I'm coming down. I'm going to have a look at this. Next time you go, can I come with you? Oh, yeah. Come on. So he goes down. They're all women. And the instructors wearing trainers. And half of the women in the class wearing trainers. The other half, they're just no shoes at all. And he's thinking,
so what would they wear then? So just obviously you go into aerobics now and it's like they're all wearing these amazing outfits. They look like fashion models rather than anything else. But what would they wear? Like, what was their kind of dress then? What was the dress sense to go to an aerobics class then?
Well, in those days, probably tracksuit bottoms and, just maybe a pair of tights or whatever, and a T-shirt. The clothing side developed after the shoes, of course.
Yeah.
But they're wearing, they used to wear these long socks. I think that those were in fashion at the time. But to Arnold, this was sort of, why don't we make a shoe specifically for these girls? On a lady's last, on a woman's last. And a woman's last is narrower than a man's last. And that would be, why don't we do that? So off he goes off to see Paul Fireman up in Boston. And he talks to Paul and said, Paul, this is going on in Los Angeles. It's great. Absolutely wonderful. I'm sure it's going to be big. And we need a shoe for them. And Paul is sort of saying, whoa, hold on. I know. We're a running company. And we're doing very nicely at running. We're growing nicely. Yeah, but, I was saying, yeah, but, we really need to look at this. Just forget it for a while. Forget it. We'll look at it if it starts to do anything. Arnold wouldn't take no for an answer. He just went round to the back door and had a word with Steve Liggett. Steve Liggett was in charge of production. And he persuaded Steve that he wanted 200 pairs of shoes. Just get me 200 pairs of shoes and let me distribute them and see what happens. Which he did. He must have been good at persuasion, because Steve Lee got him his 200 pairs of shoes. He took them down, gave them to the instructors and a few of the women who were down there, who were sort of influencers. And you know, I'd say that's the end of the story, because when people like Jane Fonda buy a pair of these and use them in her video, in her exercise video, well, it just took off. Amazingly, it took off. And you know, they didn't just wear them for aerobics. They wore them to go to work. They wore them as street shoes. And this suddenly went crazy.
So when we say crazy, if we talk in context of like in a space of time, say years, we're in what year are we?
Well, we're in 1964 now.
Okay.
No, sorry, 1984.
84, yeah.
Getting the numbers right. 1984. $9 million. We're a $9 million company.
Okay, so we're doing $9 million in 1984, and then it takes off. What's the point? Because I mean, we all know that how much Reebok is worth now, but what was the point where it literally just multiplied above and multiplied and got to the point where you was just like, wow, this is just getting out of control now?
It got out of control very quickly, because from a small company to grow from 9 million, it became 30 million the year after. In 1 year, we went from 9 to 30 million. And then from 30 million to 90 million the year after.
Wow.
From 90 million to 300 million. And from 300 million to 900 million. So we're just close on $1 billion in just over 4 years, which is like amazing. Now, we'd overcome the money problem because we've got Stephen Rubin sourcing in the Far East and providing Paul with a credit line. And so that credit line, it's okay, it grew and grew, but it was turning over very rapidly. So that was the figure. But what you've got to think of is when we got to something like $300 million revenue, to get to $900 million revenue, wasn't the money. That wasn't the problem anymore. It was product. How do you get the product? You know, we talked about Phil Knight trying to get so many shoes out of Japan. Well, how do you get the product? That really also brings in Phil Knight and Nike. Nike had been growing tremendously fast, but they hit a wall. All of a sudden, they had too much product, and they had to pull out of about 3 factories in Korea, just as we were growing. So by very good fortune, we had 3 factories to get into. Otherwise, it would have been totally impossible. We would have starved the market, and other people would have come in.
Do you see that as, I mean, there's always a question, isn't there? Because I'll put it into context. When I first moved to Dubai, you know, I risked a lot and I moved out, and not many people obviously know the story from start to now of my journey, but everyone would always brand me as lucky because something happened, you know, they see a certain lifestyle and how it's going. But I always used to look at it like, well, I kind of put myself in the right place at the right time, and then destiny took control and took me where I am today. That is a fundamental moment where it doesn't usually happen in business, where Nike, I mean, look at them, you know, that even to this day, they're huge, but the sales drop off and an opportunity. Do you look at that moment and go, somebody was really looking over my shoulder and just giving me everything that I could get to make sure that all that hard work that I've put in over the last 20 odd years doesn't go down the drain. It actually just keeps going.
Well, I mean, I agree with you totally. You need luck, and you need to be in the right place for luck. We grew with America because the running boom happened in the 70s.
Yeah. We
were there in the 70s. So yeah, that's luck. You know, if you stay around long enough, you get lucky. And these things happen. And certainly we were a very lucky company. We were lucky to do that. So yes, luck, I think, plays a big part. But like you say, it's being in the right place. It's seeing the opportunities. And a lot of people are clever people. And, you know, a lot of people have opportunities but don't quite see them, or just don't quite move fast enough, just Well, maybe
Yeah.
I'll wait. Paul Feynman, if Paul Feynman had have waited, as he suggested to Arnold, just wait, let's watch it. Then maybe that opportunity would have been missed. Arnold being so full of it, and no, I want. All of a sudden, you strike gold, you strike lucky, but it depends upon, Paul Feynman was my gatekeeper to get me into America. He was the man that, and he did a fantastic job, just as Arnold Martinez did a remarkable job in seeing something and then really getting it to grow down there in Los Angeles. And as I say, 4 years on, it was massive, absolutely massive. By that time, we were beginning. By the time late in the 80s, we'd grown bigger than Nike, bigger than Adidas, and we were nearly a $4 billion company then.
Wow.
And in 1989, that's when I left the company. I retired.
And I mean, obviously, there's a lot to kind of cover in between that time. But when it comes to you, like, I mean, you've been at this since the very, very beginning. You had a long period of time where, as you'll admit, and what is great about your story is the fact that, if 1 month would have gone bad, that could have been the end of everything. But it kept going, and you put in all the hard work. And, I love the fact of when you were talking at the end of your book, there was people that stayed with you from beginning to end. And even when there was times where you couldn't pay some of the staff because of the tough times, they still stuck by your side, which is a testament towards kind of your brother and your leadership skills. But getting to my point is, how did it feel to get to where you wanted, probably exceeded what you wanted from the business, and then go, do you know what? I need to step aside now. Like, talk us through the emotions and the decision-making process. Was it easy for you, or?
It was easy at the end to decide that now is the time to step back, because, we were fortunate. This thing took off in Los Angeles. This is Hollywood. And all the A-listers in Hollywood, they were wearing Reebok shoes. And then we got in with, we're doing the Princess Grace Memorial Tennis Tournament in Monte Carlo. And, we were sponsoring that, which meant that there were so many people. It was a pro celeb. So we got the professional tennis players coming in, Emerson and the Armitage people, a lot of good tennis. And then we got all these people from Hollywood, all the A-listers. And we even have Frank Sinatra there. We had John Forsythe, we had Roger Moore, Sean Connery, Charlton Heston, all these people. And I was hosting that because Paul was looking after America. And we had a deal. Paul, you look after America. I'll look after the rest of the world. And I was putting on distributor. I put on 30 more distributors. And also I was hosting the Monte Carlo events. And I went into the palace and, met up with Prince Rainier, and we shared a glass of champagne and had a chat. Those sort of things that you think, well, this is incredible. And, we were putting on things down in London. We had the Rose. We supplied Princess Grace. So Princess Diana with shoes, So we were at that peak, and you're thinking, wow, this is great. But I was at 30,000 feet, 35,000 feet, so many weeks of every month. I was arriving at an airport. I was being picked up by a limousine. I was going to the best Italian town, wherever that was, and we were dining at the best restaurants. And I'm thinking, there's no challenge. Where's the challenge? I've grown up being challenged and looking for answers. So, I was a street fighter probably back down there in those early days. And this was like fantastic. Well, there's a time to cherish that as a memory rather than to try and stay there. You're with these people who live in a different stratosphere. And they were nice people, really nice people. But it was time. At the end of 89, I decided it was time to walk away. We were number one. We'd overtaken Adidas, overtaken Nike, so we were number one, and we were close on a $4 billion company. Time for me to retire.
Yeah. And there's, I mean, again, as I said in the book, what I loved about it is I felt like I was there every step of the way, but there were moments in it where, really, brought me very, very close to tears, and is also a part of business where, it's not always, it's not always high flying all the time, and you had to deal with a lot of trauma. And when your brother Jeff, obviously, unfortunately, he became ill and passed away, and then obviously your marriage and your family and so on, and then on top of that as well, you later on towards the end, I believe, as well, your daughter also became ill as well. So did you ever look at those moments, and although you kind of built that success, have a slight element of regret that you didn't get to spend more time, like with your brother, for instance, and the family?
Well, it's a funny thing. You do get asked this question because it's happened in life. It's nice to think that the dream is that everything goes according to plan and everything stays the way it is. And Jeff died just as we got to America. We just got the deal done, and we were just about to make our. And he would have been the one to travel down to Barter to help them make the shoes. So maybe they wouldn't have made the mistakes that they did make, and he would have been the one that would be going out to Korea to set them up as well. And yeah, it was, but you get such a sad moment, and you just redouble your effort.
You want to make it all worthwhile.
That's right. It's got to happen. So he would have been really thrilled to see where we got to. But I still feel bad about the fact that he didn't. Today, the difference, it would have been fantastic, but he didn't. And it's the same with my daughter. Unfortunately, she died of leukemia. But she met up with Dolph Lundgren, who's him, and a lot of the.
I love the story. I was going to say, I love the story in the book. Was it Roger Moore or Sean Connery? I couldn't remember from memory, where they actually went and spoke to her, and it was like one of the best moments she'd ever had.
Yeah, that was Roger Moore. He presented her with a necklace. But there were times like that. Okay, unfortunately, she was to die very shortly after 6 months or whatever afterwards, and it was tragedy. You just wish, like, could you change anything in that? People say, look, go back. What would you change? Would you change? What do you think would have been better? Would you take it? And my answer is, look, what I'd like to change, I couldn't, because I can't do anything about it, either Jeff or Kay. And then you come to, well, we became number one. We beat Adidas. We beat Nike. What would you change? You say, what would you change when you become number one? It was a fantastic journey and a very enjoyable journey with these moments of sadness. But, it leaves a memory. It leaves something you've got. And this is why, time to put it in a book, share these things. So,
did you only have one? Did you have one child, or you had more children?
I had two.
You had two.
Yeah, David, the son, he worked for Reebok for some time, and then he decided to leave and go and work on his own, which is fine. And if that's what he wants to do, that's what he wants to do. But the disaster was the fact, because the daughter and the mother are very close usually, and for my wife, it was like losing her best friend.
So naturally, there was most likely an element of blame towards you for not being there at times. And
well, there was probably some sort of blame, or I don't know. She took it very hard, and I can't say it was easy for me. It wasn't, but I think it was harder for Jean. She felt deeper. And there's maybe some striking out and whatever, but she didn't really get over that. When you run a business, it's like, can you put it to one side while you do something else? No, you can't, because the business has to keep running. It's a provider, but more than a provider, it's also a family. It's also there's a lot of people in that business who also are family. So can you let them down? But you have to make space. If you can make space, allow your family in. My wife, she wouldn't travel. She said it made her ill. Although we did do around the world trip on one
Yeah.
occasion.
There
Which
was,
father
I was
turned out.
there was one part in the book, and again, I don't want to try and tease too many people into the stories, but there was one story where, you took and I can't remember which country it was from memory, but they took you to a place and they were trying to entertain you, and next thing you know, strippers are coming out, and she's like, is this what you're doing on all of your trips? And I mean, you couldn't picture a worse moment. It's like typical, isn't it? It's like you'd never come, but then when you do come, the guest decides to
Yes,
take us to a strip club. And I wasn't even aware of it. Now she has this perception of this is what I do every time I go away.
that's right. Yeah, but it's funny that it was Japan, of all places, Japan, and we were launching the Reebok brand in Japan at the time, and
Yeah.
so they put on a big spread. They put these things up, but the worst thing is that they decided it would be really good if they brought those strippers to the table. so, so after the show, they actually brought them to the table. I
Oh.
was thinking, no, they were fully
just
dressed.
you just accidentally get your drink and just spill it over the table. Like, oh, go away. And it's just like you're sitting in the sofa thinking, swallow me, please, right now. But yeah, again, like you say, I think those moments, and again in the book, I really recommend to everyone that they go and buy it right now, and either have a listen on Audible or read the book. But lots of special moments there. Now, obviously, that's a long story short of how you built Reebok. But what are you doing today now? Like, what's your role within the brand?
Well, you know that, sorry, you probably know that Adidas are now selling the brand, so the brand is up for sale, and anytime now, they should make a decision. And
Yeah.
I'm somewhat in touch with the people in Boston, who that's where the headquarters is, and it's going to be very exciting. Right? That really is going to be exciting. So that's it. Plus the fact, we're going to get this book to a bestseller in America, and that's what we're looking for. Get it a bestseller. So many people. I get a lot of people like yourself coming on and wanting to talk about it because they bought a pair of pumps, whatever. They bought this, and they love their shoes, and so
Yeah.
they're so interested in that story. So we're trying to get it building, and
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
hope to get it into a film as
And
well. So
and
that's keeping me busy.
yeah, I can imagine. And you know what, as well, like ever since we confirmed the podcast, it's amazing how many people now I notice wearing Reebok. Yeah, it's like it's in my mind now every time, and having the chance to chat to you on the podcast. I almost feel like I'm kind of a part of the brand as well, because again, such a fascinating story that came out of this. Now, just before we go, obviously the podcast is called The Recipe to Success. So I know there's never a defining one thing, but if I asked you what would be your recipe to success, what would it be?
Well, we're actually now on a new campaign, and the new campaign is exactly that, and it's just keep going. That's what we're actually doing this now. We're setting up a website, and we've got meetings. We've got meetings with a government-driven company, and it's all to do with just keep going. So my advice to people is, and you probably know it yourself, when you've probably gone through one or two areas where you're like, oops, just keep going.
Yeah.
You've got to enjoy that business, whatever you're in. If you don't enjoy it, it's going to be tough.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
try to get in somewhere that you're really enjoying the business, and then just keep going, because you will come across that time where people will say it's luck, but you were there, you saw the
Yeah.
opportunity, and don't take too much advice. Too much advice. Most people who give you advice would probably put you off
Yeah.
taking risk.
And they
Because
probably wouldn't
being
even
an
follow their own advice.
Oh, no, they wouldn't. They wouldn't follow their own advice. But, being an entrepreneur really is another word for taking risks.
Yeah.
And if you take a risk, nobody can tell you when you take a risk the certainty of the end. They can't tell you that. because there is no certainty to the end. It's up to you. You know, for me, it's, and we say this, that the race isn't over until you've won.
Yeah.
And so you just keep going. And, you know, that's so incredible. I mean, my life with Reebok, it's a bit like the song by the Eagles, Hotel California.
Yeah.
You know, you check out, but you can never leave.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that for my life anyway, it certainly has been that way, that, you know, you do something, you create something. And we were sort of full of the business. You know, that's it, it's Reebok. And like, you know, you didn't know who Joe Foster was. No, you knew Reebok. And that was the intention. Intention was Reebok.
Yeah, no one behind it apart from the brand. So yeah, Joe, I'd like to thank you so much for obviously the time that you spent to have a chat with us. I hope, I mean, loads of people here will know obviously the brand, but it gets us the opportunity to expose you to the Dubai market and the people here, because there's a lot of British people here that I think once they hear the story of the brand, they're going to go straight to the shop and buy the books. And if you're listening to this, you can pretty much get it in every single bookshop. But obviously the beauty of online now is you have Audible and you also have Amazon as well. So you can purchase the book online. But just on a final note, I'd just like to say thank you very much for sharing your story with us and getting real deep with us. And I wish you all the success for your future endeavors and getting your book to #1.